Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Girl Got Goals podcast. I'm here with my beautiful, fantastic co-host, Kimberly Blalack, IFBB Bikini Pro. How are you today, Kimberly?
I'm fine. After that intro, I think you overreached there a little bit.
I think you're beautiful and wonderful.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Your skin's looking so good. Like, I was going back and looking at, we have a YouTube channel now, guys, and I've started kind of going back and editing like some of our older videos when we started actually recording video for this podcast. We didn't always, but I was looking at the older videos and then like comparing it to your skin now, and it's like night and day difference. Not that it looked bad before, but it's just like your skin's like glowing and radiating.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I need to go back and do that because I told you I asked Carrie almost on a daily, and then I'm looking, and because we're looking at it so much, I feel like it looks a little better, but it's hard to tell.
I can tell because I don't see you all the time. It's like every time I've seen you since you started like your skincare journey, it looks better and better every time. I'm so jealous.
Maybe we'll have to do an episode on that.
Yeah, we will. We'll have to bring your skincare girl on. Didn't you say that she said something about she would come on the podcast and like talk about the things that you're doing? I know you've created like a 12-month plan and you do a different treatment every month, and it's obviously working.
Yes, she did say that. Actually, I get my facial done tomorrow, and I'm excited about that. So
I love facials.
Yeah,
so for those of you who haven't watched our YouTube channel yet, go to the Girl Got Goals podcast YouTube channel, and you can see Kimberly's skincare journey. I've only got 2 videos up there so far, but I'm working on getting the rest of them. We were really hesitant about putting ourselves out there because, number one, it's early Sunday morning when we're recording these podcasts. Our hair's not fixed. We have no makeup on. Like, it's just raw footage of us, talking on the podcast. And so, but I have had a lot of people like Brenna, she's like, I don't listen to things. I have to watch it. So if you don't have it on YouTube, I'm not going to be able to listen to it. So there are people out there who are more visual and who want to see us talking to each other. So we're working on that. So go out there and subscribe and support us.
I don't know who would want to see me on here, but yeah.
All of our mannerisms.
I'm trying to be focused today. I told her I went back and was watching those 2, and I'm just all over the place, and I'm looking at things, And
well, we were very nervous. That was back in the beginning when we first started recording. We're still nervous, but I was like sitting like a little toy soldier. Like I felt like I couldn't move and couldn't blink. And like, I was just looking at myself going, I look so weird. I was just smiling. And it was kind of funny. But anyway, that's not the reason we're here today. I just wanted to shamelessly plug our new YouTube channel and let everybody know they could watch us there. But today we're going to talk about the mental health changes during menopause. And the goal of our episode today is just normalize and validate the emotional experiences that women have as they transition through life. And sometimes I hate to even label it like perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, because it's just life. It's a change, a transition that every woman's going to go through. Your age might be different. The way you experience it may be different, but it is just a transition. And I know in past episodes, we have redundantly hit on our own experiences and anxiety and depression and insomnia and things. And we are going to, touch on that today. But after listening to a podcast on the Mel Robbins podcast, specifically about the hormonal changes in the brain and how that affects your mental health and your physical health, we really felt like it was important to give mental health its own episode so that we could discuss how these hormonal shifts affect you mentally during the perimenopause and menopause transition, because there are significant hormonal changes that impact the brain, particularly like neurotransmitters and how they function, hormone signaling, the pathways, and how they affect your mental and cognitive health. So we have hormones. And in that podcast episode, she was like, well, what is a hormone? And so some people may not even know what a hormone is. So it is just a chemical that's released in certain I'd say dosages, certain, amounts in your brain. And as you transition through perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause, the amounts of those hormones change. And so you have significant drop offs. The biological purpose of a woman's reproductive system is obviously to, procreate. Some people choose to do that and some people don't, but our bodies all are created to do that. And as your body reaches a certain age, it's like, well, it's not really, healthy for us to procreate anymore, or we're kind of going to start shutting down that factory and so she explained it as these hormones quit coming to work. They kind of get lazy. They're like, well, you don't really need me today, so I'm just going to take the day off. So our progesterone, our estrogen, and at a slower, much less noticeable level, our testosterone starts decreasing. And that's when we start seeing these shifts, and we just don't feel ourselves anymore. We start having certain symptoms and side effects. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, are those hormones, how they show up in our body, and how they affect us mentally, which I know a lot of our mental health is due to our physical health. Like we said last time in our last episode, sometimes you're doing things and certain behaviors and it feels as if you're driven by something you can't control. And that does happen for women, especially because we feel these wild fluctuations in hormones all the time. And so sometimes, it's a cliche for a reason, we have crazy women, around that time of the month or during menopause or whatever, because we do have these wild shifts in hormones.
Oh, that was a very good podcast. And some of the analogies, like you say, that she gave, of we're born with them and then they start working, which is what she was asking, that Dr. Shepherd. And once they start working, that's the reason why when you go through puberty, how they're in heightened and they're trying to figure out where to go, what to do, what their job is. Then you get that all figured out. Everything kind of levels out. We have children, don't have children, go through things. And then, like you say, they just one day they start saying, well, we're going to slow down. We're going to stop. We're not going to send as much of this and much of that. So lead us into what you've got right down there about what happens mentally when some of this starts happening, when it starts slowing down.
Yeah. And I was just going to mention the podcast name and episode name. So if anybody wants to go and listen to it themselves, it's the Mel Robbins podcast, which I subscribe to and I listen faithfully. Love her podcast. It's the ultimate guide to women's hormones. Use science to reset your body, balance mood, and feel amazing. And I listened to that, on Friday. And it says Mel sits down with top OBGYN and hormone expert, Dr. Jessica Shepherd, to unpack the science of women's hormones. And Dr. Shepherd has written a book called, what was it? Generation M. Yeah, Generation M. So I ordered that. That book's going to arrive, I think, today or tomorrow. And I'm going to read it because it's all about this generation and how we're going to change the way we show up during menopause. So just plugging that there because I felt like it was a really good episode. I shared it with you and everybody can go listen to it. Okay. So what I've done is I've broken out each hormone that, is significantly impacted during the perimenopause, menopause transition. So we're going to talk about estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, serotonin, and dopamine, and kind of how they affect the brain specifically. And so estrogen, especially estradiol, has powerful effects on the brain. So in the brain, estrogen's job is to modulate neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, which are your mood and motivation hormones. You've talked about losing motivation. Like you're typically like a very driven person, but some days you just felt like you couldn't just kick your own butt and get on. Estrogen also supports synaptic plasticity, which is your learning and memory. So if you experience like brain fog, like you just can't remember things, you can't multitask anymore. I know that's some things that I experienced. It protects neurons from oxidative stress and inflammation. and it regulates the hypothalamus, which controls body temperature, sleep, and appetite. So it sounds to me like estrogen's a very heavy hitter. Like it pretty much touches every part of your life. When you have like mood and motivation, learning and memory, stress and inflammation, sleep, appetite, and temperature. That's when we're going through, night sweats and mood swings, and we're ravenous and we just can't quit eating, or the opposite, just not hungry anymore. It's when estrogen starts dropping, which is kind of what happens through this transition, it starts not showing up, in the same amounts. And we start to feel the mood instability. There's an increased risk of anxiety and depression. Like I said, memory issues and brain fog, sleep disruption, hot flashes due to hypothalamic dysregulation. I think every woman our age can at least attest to one of these symptoms. Like, oh, I felt that. And they may not know why. Because I don't feel like we're taught about our bodies. Like Dr. Shepherd was saying, biologically, our bodies are meant to reproduce. So in science and research, the medical community has largely only researched and cared for a woman during her reproductive years. Like it's all about pregnancy.
Right.
We're told to not even see an OBGYN until we're 18 or we're sexually active. It's like, well, you're having a period a long time before that. You're having hormonal shifts and things that you may need care for long before that and long after that, and with us having periods earlier and earlier in these new generations, that cycle's starting earlier. And like they said in the podcast, which I never really thought about, the life expectancy of women or people were like 50 back then. Now we're living to 70 and 80. So we have like this 30-year lifespan increase, but the quality of life is not being cared for women in this area.
And I wished when she said that, it came to my mind about how I went to that doctor I've told y'all about that said, I could prescribe you stuff, but I think about the women back in the, 1900s and, they just had babies and went on about their life and they were fine. And when she said that, I wished that I would have heard this before then, because I'd be like, yeah, and they were dying young, though.
They were dead by your age. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't have to worry about the way they felt right now because they didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. So I was thinking that does make sense. We're living way longer and way past all of that. So why not optimize how we feel, So I was like, that makes perfect sense. Why did I not say that to him or really think about it?
Well, we didn't know. I mean, until she said that in the podcast, I've heard before that, life expectancy obviously has gotten better with modern medicine and better food and all this other stuff. But I never correlated that
number
to women's health and menopause. Like I said, I never thought about menopause before. It's not talked about, It's not taught to us. So when we start seeing these changes in our body, we just think something's wrong. We just think, and sometimes it happens so gradually over time, you just kind of ignore it, and it's like, oh, well, I don't feel myself, I really just feel like something's off. But then you're told, like that doctor told you, oh, you're just getting older. That's just part of it. It's just something that happens,
Yeah.
But today,
you just made me realize something, honestly, also. So, I mean, for me, it's going to be different, because I was doing a show, but it could be other people that have this. So anytime I'm feeling off, and I discussed it on here, I was like, well, my thyroid's probably messed up. It's low. And I did think, well, I just come off of a show. So, I just got to get my thyroid regulated. When in all reality, if you think about it, some of these things that we're talking about with the mental, I don't know if I necessarily had anxiety, but I was saying, I'm not feeling motivated. I'm usually a mind over matter. I can usually push myself. I'm kind of feeling depressed. I don't really know why, because I'm not really depressed. I just have low mood. And I kept saying it was all my thyroid. And yes, my thyroid was off, but that could have not been everything, because also my progesterone was low, my estrogen was low, my testosterone was really low. I almost had none. And those could have been some factors. With also throwing in there, I was listening to another podcast this morning about, her name's Allison, but I guess her last name's Testu. I'm not sure how she pronounces that. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-mm. So somebody was interviewing her, and she's talking about, your hormones and the diet and women losing their periods. Well, I've never had to go through that because I had a hysterectomy. So I don't know when I'm doing a show if my hormones are messed up and I would lose a period, because some of them will talk about losing their period towards the end because I don't have one. So, I dieted for 6 months. I don't know what that did to any of
your
that.
Cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have one.
Yeah.
And then fast forward back to her podcast of her saying, once you have a baby, it took you 9 months to look like that. It's going to take you, a year.
9 to 12. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's also talking, right. And so she's talking about your period after a show. And sometimes if you reverse diet, it's going to take longer. So she was advocating for not a long reverse diet, kind of getting back to your maintenance calories, because you need that, and you need the calories to get your hormones right, to get your period right. That was a long going into saying that coming off of that show is when all of this happened to me. So technically, yes, could have been my thyroid, but it was probably me also with my thyroid's low and my hormones being low from the show. But I also am in perimenopause, and we knew that way beforehand. So it's like all of a sudden, like the light bulb just went off that's probably what the hell was going on with me. And I'm just saying, just push yourself. You're being stupid. It's just your thyroid. Just get over it. But
I remember us having those conversations. I remember you telling me those things, and from an outsider looking in, I'm like, anybody undergoing the amount of physical stress you were putting on your body and mental stress of having to keep up with life and go through prep would be probably feeling the same things, because your mind, body, spirit's all connected. And like you said, you have to get to such a low calorie, low fat, because I think hormones are kind of produced off of fats. And then when you go low fat in your diet, which is a huge fad for women, ever since, what was it, the 60s or 70s, low fat diet came out or whatever, then you're kind of tanking your natural hormone production. And so I'm sitting there like, no shit, Sherlock. I imagine you do feel like shit. I imagine you don't have any motivation. Like, I would feel the same way if I was in your position. But when it's you don't have that outside looking in perspective. You are just you, and you're going through daily life. It's kind of like looking at your skin. You look at your skin every day in the mirror, and it gradually changes, kind of like gaining weight. You don't notice it until it's to such a degree that something's significantly different, but an outsider looking in can be like, oh yeah, I mean, I totally see that. But
yeah,
there's probably a lot of women. Go ahead.
I think it hit me so hard because when I'm in prep, yes, I have moments, of course, and it's more or less just thinking that I don't look good enough and that pressure. But I'm motivated to go to the gym. I'm excited for the next day because I'm thinking, oh, I go to bed today, and when I get up in the morning, I mean, that first morning, and when I'm taking a shower, I know this don't sound stupid, but I love bathing. I can feel my muscles. I'm rubbing my abs, because like I don't see them very often.
Yeah, you have that goal that's driving you. You're almost running off adrenaline at that point.
Exactly. And then after it's over, you might have a few weeks still of that adrenaline. And then it's like, I feel like I hit rock bottom. Yep. And then when the fat starts coming back, then it really starts mentally affecting me, because then I'm like, oh, I don't look as good as I did. Oh, I'm getting fluffier. And I think all of that just kind of hit me like a brick wall this time. And I think that's part of the reason why I wasn't as motivated too. But I know that it was driven by my hormones.
Light bulb just went off in my head. What we experience in prep is a very accelerated version of probably what women experience in menopause. Because, we're taking our hormones, we're feeling some type of way, and then we're gaining weight back. And mentally, that's a really rough ride. Well, the same things happen in our bodies during menopause, and we'll cover this in the next episode when we talk about muscle loss and weight gain and how that's impacted by menopause. But I think women are starting to see these declines in hormones just normally, not even an accelerated pressurized version that we create for ourselves, but in life, they're feeling some type of way and it's happening to them. So they might not even notice it. They may just be like, I feel off. I don't feel myself or whatever, and then they're going to start to see some weight changes, and fluctuations. They may be doing the same thing that they always done. They said on the podcast, you may still be running the same 2 miles. You may be still taking the same exercise classes. You may still be eating the exact same, but you're gaining 5, 10, 15 pounds and you feel like you have no control over it,
And then that too works on your mental and
1,000%. Yes.
And then
that's what I was getting at. We're feeling that, year after year as in competition prep, but that's the same way that women in general are feeling as they go through this transition. I don't know too many women my age that are in the gym that haven't been impacted by this. I hear it all the time. They're doing the same classes. They're burning the same amount of calories. They're watching their weight. They're tracking everything. I even had a registered dietitian, talk to me the other day. She's a listener of the podcast. And she's like, I know all the things. This is what I do for a living. I track my food, but I was gaining weight, out of control. And it was her hormones and things were off. And she had to really advocate for herself to get that back. So definitely what we put ourselves through in the competition prep is the same biological cycles that we're experiencing, through menopause. I feel like I went off on a really long rabbit hole, but as you were talking, it dawned on me. It's like, holy shit, everything we experience through the prep and the reverse is the same thing that every woman on this earth kind of is going to experience when they go through this transition. It's just a longer, slower process, so it may not be as noticeable. I said all that to say that once.
That's okay. I'm the one that went down the hole, but
sorry, I'm a verbal processor, which helps when you have a podcast because you talk a lot. It'd be weird if I didn't.
But when you said that a while ago, I was like, why didn't I think before that it could have been my hormones too? I just am so programmed to just think anytime I don't feel good, it's my thyroid. It's my thyroid.
Yeah.
I don't feel good because.
Or it's me, or I'm lazy, or I suck, I should just do better, which is mental. It's all mental. It's the story we tell ourselves,
Well, we tell ourselves that there's something wrong with us, that we're the only ones going through this, that nobody else feels this way. And that's really not true. Matter of fact, this is kind of off the subject a little bit, but we're in the gym and there's this lady that's been coming in there. And I had never seen her in there before, but she's been coming for a few months, jacked up upper body. I mean, her shoulders look great and I can appreciate that. And I find myself staring then I'll ask Carrie all the time, do my shoulders look as good as hers? Because when I look at myself, I can't look at myself like you can look at somebody else. But if he tells me, yours look about like hers, and I'll be going, he's just saying that.
Body dysmorphia is real. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And we've talked about before, I have rounded shoulders, so I don't have where I sit up straight all the time. And I try to work on that. I feel like if I do, I look weird doing it, where some people are just naturally, straight across. And so that helps their rear delts. And she just has that. And so I've, admired her from a distance. Well, I'm working out the other day and I had my headphones in, but she comes in and asks, Carrie, is that Kimberly? So I won't get into all of that. I'll tell you.
You're famous.
Yeah. Well, I know her ex-husband, and we won't get into all that. But but I didn't know I did. But she had told him, there's a pro in the gym. She said, I told him, she's got it on her backpack. And he said, well, that's probably Kimberly. You should go speak to her. So I take my headphones out when I see, she's made conversation with Carrie. And she begins to tell me all of that. And then she was like, you look so good. And I'm sitting there like, no, I don't.
I think you look good.
Yeah. And so, I commented on her shoulders. I was like, I've told him before, and so later I'm sitting there thinking, this is so weird. Like, it felt good to hear her say that, but still in my mind, I'm denying it because I'm telling Carrie, it's off season. I don't look good now. She should see me when I'm in prep. You know what I'm saying? Like, these things are going through my head, but at the same time, it's odd to think I've been staring at her, but she's been staring at me.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that people look at me like that. I don't feel that special. I don't feel like people are looking at me like I look at them. And so that was like a weird exchange, but it was amazing at the same time, but
I see men do that a lot in the gym. They will approach each other as strangers and compliment each other. And we've talked about this before in our gym intimidation podcast. But women don't do that often enough. And I think we should, because like you said, we're not talking to each other. I think I've talked to Jimmy about this a lot lately because I've been trying to work on my own internal struggles and my own self-confidence. But I think we're pit against each other in competition at an early age, because society says that we're supposed to be demure and more passive, and we are supposed to be picked by the man. And so I was like, men don't have to do anything special. They don't have to do their hair. They don't have to do their makeup. They don't have to do, fingernails and eyelashes and whatever. We just accept them as they are. And I'll see a beautiful woman with a very mediocre man, but I feel like it's like less good men out there and more women. And we're all in a sea of like, pick me, even though we may not consciously have that in our minds, we're consciously trying to better ourselves, even if we're not in competition with anybody consciously. I think that underlying societal layer of competition kind of keeps us comparing ourselves to one another, which is one of the reasons why I have gotten off social media lately, is because I'm working on my self-confidence and I don't want to be comparing myself to anybody else. And so, I think that keeps us from approaching each other, whereas men are more taught to play in teams, to work in teams, to be comrades, that kind of thing. So I see that playing out in everyday life. And so to your point, we did say all that to say this again. We get very long-winded, but it's not just you. Every woman at some point is going to go through some type of this. And we need to support each other. We need to band together. We need to be talking about this and educating each other and educating ourselves so that you don't have to go through that alone. Because I think that was the worst part of my journey was, number one, I didn't know what was happening to me. And number two, I had nobody to talk to about it. I didn't know anybody in my life who had been through the same things I was currently going through. And that's a very scary place to be. Yeah. Fear of the unknown, I think, is the worst. So
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you know what's happening and you know why, which is why we're discussing the hormones today and in a sciencey kind of way, explaining what's going on, I think mentally I can deal with it better, knowing that these changes are going to happen, knowing why it's happening, and that it's not going to last forever and that you're not alone.
Yeah. I also would like to throw out, and speaking of being there for other people, if you've got a friend that's going through it, she might be having a worse time, because if we'd have been friends back then, I didn't have the same experience that you did. And I feel in a way that I've been blessed enough that because I started the bodybuilding at 40 and have been around more people discussing this and in the, insight of your body and what's going through it. If I had not been, I probably would have hit all of that and not known what was going on. or in a different manner, I wouldn't have already attempted the HRT or, started things. I feel like because I started so young, I nipped some of that in the bud of some of my symptoms being as rough as they could have been or might not have been, because everybody's is different. So sometimes when you've got or know of a person that theirs is worse than what yours was, I feel some women have the tendency to think, she is crazy. I just don't understand. I've seen that.
Oh, that was me. That was people in my life talking about me at that point. Like I said, I was in a church that I had been in for like 10 years and I had close relationships there. And I watched those relationships change and I heard the things said behind my back when I hit the lowest point of my life. And I mean, I felt like I was going crazy. I mean, it was a dark time for me. But I mean, I came out the other side better, but during that point, instead of just writing somebody off as crazy, reach out to them, try to put yourself in their shoes, try to be compassionate, try to understand if it's not like you said, if it's not happening to you or if it has happened to you, reach out and ask that person, are they okay? I had one friend that, she was just there for me regardless. And she came over and was like, here, I'm going to watch the baby for you while you go take a shower. Cause I had my niece at the time and she was only like 6 months old. She's like, I'm going to watch the baby for you and you just go take a shower. And I would have asked her to do that, but she did it on her own accord. And she showed up, she went to the beach with me one day and we just laid on the beach and just talked. It was like the most relaxing day ever. It was just little things like that. It was just everyday things. So I love that you said that. Like if you know somebody who's going through it, or just, I mean, if you have a friend that just seems off for some reason, don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to ask if they're okay. Refer her to the podcast, hey, have you listened to this podcast? Because, or have you read the book, Generation M? Have you listened to Mel Robbins? But, there's a lot of information out there nowadays.
Because you never know what somebody's going through. Like, even though you were younger, you had taken in your sister's kids. So you had small children at home that was also impacting. So you never know what somebody's going through eternally. If we don't have the self-confidence, us going up to somebody at the gym and how that would make you feel of saying, hey, I've been noticing, you're looking really good. Or some of the people I can see that are coming in that have changed physically, and they could be going through a breakup. They could be going through their husband cheated on them and they're at a low and you don't really know what that would do for them. But I feel like our generation, because you've talked about your daughter being better about that. And I think some of that was changed in our younger children. But our generation, we were taught you had the cliques in school. You wanted the boyfriend. If the guy cheated on you, then you've got the low self-esteem. You had all of the women, the pinups. Now you've got the models that are heavier and you got the plus size models and you got the, Demi Moore posing pregnant or the ones saying, oh, this is how I look without makeup. You didn't have that when we were coming up. They had the filters. You put up the skinny women and that's what we seen and that's what we were supposed to be. Or your boyfriend or your husband was looking at that and thought, why don't you look like this?
Right.
And so that's what we thought we had to look like. So when I would walk into a room, I felt so down on myself that I'm evaluating the room of
where do I compare?
Yeah.
Yes.
And who was my husband looking at?
Yeah.
And that's terrible because it wasn't necessarily that they had ever done anything to make me feel that way necessarily. But I felt like if he looked at somebody, he thought I was less than. And some of that does come with age. I mean, yes, this don't sound stupid at the same time, but I don't necessarily want to know he's looking at somebody, but I'm not dumb enough to think that he's not. I'm not dumb enough to think that he doesn't see another woman and say, that's an attractive woman.
Yeah.
It's what goes past that. I mean, because I can look, and say, this is an attractive man, but that's all I think. I know he could be a jerk. He's not this. This is the man that has sacrificed for me, done for me, loved me, been there for me, sees my stretch marks, whatever.
And he's probably thinking the same about you when he sees an attractive female, but it's the story you have in your head.
Correct.
That you're automatically comparing yourself to her, you know.
Correct.
And we've got off on a tangent.
Yes, that's mental stuff.
Yeah, it's all mental. Yeah, for sure. But to bring it back to the hormones, next we have progesterone. And progesterone has a calming anti-anxiety effect. And due to its influence on GABA, which is one of the, chemicals in your brain that makes you calm, the brain's primary inhibitory calming neurotransmitter, the lower progesterone, as we have both experienced, very heavily impacts you being able to relax enough to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So as progesterone drops, you have increased irritability and anxiety, sleep problems, especially difficult staying asleep. I know a lot of people probably hit that 2 to 3 a.m., mark, and you wake up and then you're like, bing, and you can't go back to sleep even though you're tired. And then you have heightened stress and sensitivity. So all the things that we've talked about today are just, I think, magnified as we lose progesterone and we lose that satiating, calming hormone. Then we're automatically more on heightened alert, more on, how do I compare? More on, is she prettier than me? More is I'm gaining weight and I'm stressed, and then with the brain fog and all the other things, with estrogen falling, I know I have felt like in my career, I'm not as good as I once was. I once could juggle all these things. I worked a full-time job. I had 3 kids. I was going to school full-time. I got my master's degree. Like I was bam, 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 superwoman, never missed a beat. Well, late 30s, start hitting perimenopause, and all these issues start happening to me. These changes physically in my brain and my body started impacting my output, how much I was able to exert energy every day. I was getting tired more often, earlier in the day. I just didn't have energy for the things that I once was. And then progesterone drops, you're not sleeping. Well, that just impacts everything even more. Everything that you're losing with decreased estrogen, then you have decreased progesterone. Well, that's just heightening that. Because if you're not sleeping and you're more irritable and you have more anxiety, then of course the brain fog is going to be worse. Your body temperature is not going to regulate as well. Like everything is impacted by sleep and mood and irritability.
I know when I can't sleep, I feel like it heightens your anxiety too, because you start thinking
1,000%. Yeah.
I need to go to sleep because I got to do this today. And if I don't do this, then I'm going to be tired. And it just, because our brains don't shut off. And I think that's where some of that, and then that makes your cortisol levels go up. And
I was just going to say, we're going to touch on cortisol, and it's just all looped in together. Like you were talking about your thyroid being off, all these hormones are regulated by each other. And even though one of them may not be high or low, if they're high or low in relation to each other, that can even have a negative impact, because I'm estrogen dominant. If you look at my estrogen on a scale, it's right where it needs to be as far as my cycle and everything. However, my testosterone and progesterone were low. So in relation to my estrogen was dominant. When they tried to give me estrogen, it was too much, so it's like this balancing act that everything's connected.
Kind of back to the analogy of going to work. If you work at a business, you are expecting everybody to be there and do their job.
Correct.
But if somebody doesn't show up for that job that day, then the other person's working overtime or it doesn't get done and there's that lack there. So it's all everybody's got to show up to work.
Exactly. Everybody's got to show up. They got to show up on time. They got to do their jobs. They have to go home when they're supposed to. I thought that was a great analogy that she gave in that podcast, because in my mind, I understand, that, and these hormones show it up. I would say, so our next hormone is testosterone. So testosterone is showing up in women in smaller amounts, and it supports libido, confidence, motivation, and muscle mass. So it's not like testosterone is our major driving hormone like it is for a man, and it decreases more slowly over time. So it's not going to drop off majorly like your estrogen, your progesterone. So you may not notice changes over. And I know just with life stressors, just having a stressful life or more things on your plate is going to decrease your libido. You could take a hit to your confidence for all the reasons we were talking about before. You might be in comparison and other things. You may be tired, more fatigued, so your motivation's more low. So I think a lot of women don't really realize how important testosterone is to them because it's labeled as a male hormone. Mm-hmm. And even a lot of the hormone replacement therapy clinics I see popping up even today are men's health, and they only serve men's. Like, I'm so disappointed in Club for Fitness right now because they have partnered with a medical clinic, like I have said before on previous episodes. And I was so excited for this to happen because it's a membership program where you can get hormone replacement therapy and peptides and things like that. Well, girl, how about I see the advertisement go up on the screen in the club and it says men's testosterone replacement therapy.
I got the text about them coming out with that, but I didn't realize.
So I don't know if that's just bad advertising, and I'm gonna have to ask that question, and that they also serve women, but there are a lot of medical professionals that will not serve women with testosterone, even though you experienced, you had none. And it's an important hormone. Like you said, everybody needs to show up to work every day and do their job. Well, if you have one that's not showing up, then something's off. So we need testosterone just as much as we need estrogen and progesterone.
Well, I wished I had the answer to this, but you remember, I think it might have been the last podcast or the one before that, can't remember, where I said it would be great if once we kind of started puberty or leveled out in puberty or the first time we start going to the OB, if they would take, all of those tests and you have correct. And never really dawned on me until the other day. I was actually, the lady at my work laughs, but I've had this. It's not even in the book no more. It's like where I have wrote everybody's names and addresses and passwords. I have had this since probably like, I don't know, 1997 or 98.
Wow.
I literally have it held together. I've taped some of the pages and it is literally held together with a gym clip in the middle. It's so old and raggedy, but I'm going through it because I was looking for an old password to do something. And I seen this doctor's name. Well, this doctor is who I was going to, and I might have told you this, but I can't remember. I was probably about 26, 27-ish, and he had given me testosterone shot. Well, at the time, I can't even remember. My mother is the one that sent me to him, and I know he was in Daphne, but I don't know why he was giving me that. I was so young. If he told me, I don't remember, or it could have been one of these things, we're going to give you this, and I was just like, okay, because I didn't know to ask questions, and I was too shy to ask the questions. So his name was there, and I thought, I wonder if he's still around, because the reason why I quit going to him is because Mama had said he was going to start research. So I put his name in, and how about, girl, he has a clinic in Fairhope now, and he's actually online as being the founder of the Vampire Facial, the O shot and the P shot, which is like shots that for ED for a guy and for arousal for women.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I was going to this man before he was anybody.
He was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But I never really knew why he was giving me those shots. So I call Mom and I'm like telling her about it. And I'm asking her, and she's like, well, he was like an internal medicine doctor at the same time. And she's like, well, I think I had you go to him because of your thyroid and, me just being tired and my kids young. So anyway, he had to have done blood work. To make a long story short, he had to have done blood work. And I don't think that if my test would have been high, he would have been giving me that. So it makes me wonder if even back in my late 20s, if my testosterone was low, to of why he gave it to me.
Right.
So
That
I
makes
was like,
sense.
yeah. So I was like, wow.
I wonder if he still has your records from back then. Like if he still had your medical records, could you call and ask like, hey, I was a patient back then. I'm curious about my testosterone. Could you send me any blood work you had?
Yeah.
Surely they have to keep it.
You would think, but no telling where he would have that at. I mean, because this was, I married Kerry in 2003, and this was before I married him. So this had to have been like 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been that many years ago.
Yeah. Well, I've always kind of had a decreased libido. I mean, even as a teenager, you hear about horny teenagers and all that stuff. That was never me, So I probably have had the same issue, but like you said, we're not testing for it. So we really don't know. We really don't, like a mammogram, they had me start doing mammograms at 35, just one to have a baseline for when I turned 40. And I had to start having them, periodically so they'd have a baseline. I too wish that once you started going to the OBGYN, they would just go ahead and run a hormone panel. And maybe this is the way of the future. Maybe they're going to start doing this in women's healthcare as it progresses and as we get better. And hopefully our children won't have to suffer. We're kind of pioneers, I'm thinking about Generation M, and all this starting to come out about menopause and stuff. And it's like, I can't believe women's health has been living in the Stone Ages this entire time. And like, why has nobody said anything? Why has nobody advocated for this to change? Why has women not spoke up before now? It just kind of, it's mind boggling to me, but that was just, I guess, the generation. You just suck it up, buttercup, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going. You don't complain about it. It just is what it is.
Well, as long as everything was okay for us to reproduce, it was like that's the only thing they care about as far as health for us. Yeah. If you were having a problem getting pregnant, they come out with stuff for that because
in vitro fertilization, all of that.
That's what it's almost like that's what, and I'm not saying it's not. That is the main reason why. Well, I shouldn't word it that way.
I mean, it's the reason we have a uterus. I get it.
Yeah. God put us on this earth for reproduction. And that's the reason why we have, where our hips will get bigger and where we carry more fat because that helps with the reproduction. I mean, all of that makes sense.
Men cannot reproduce. They cannot carry a baby in their bodies. We get that. Some people may choose to reproduce. Some people may not. No shame in your game if you don't. And if you can't, there's no shame in that either. I want to preface that because there are a lot of women who would love to have a baby who just physically can't do it. Right. But from a physiological standpoint, we're just saying that we have these things because, women are supposed to carry babies and reproduce should they choose to do so.
But outside of that, I feel like that the science hasn't been there because it just didn't matter,
Correct. Yeah. And I think largely in part that is our fault, because we haven't spoken up and said, this is not okay. But like, I didn't even know that it wasn't okay. I didn't even know this was an issue. I didn't know there was such a disparity between men's reproductive health care and women's reproductive health care until I started researching for this podcast, till I started going through it myself, till I started listening to other people talk. I didn't realize that I couldn't trust society to just take care of my needs because they're needs and they're important.
Yeah. Or you're going to have some old doctor. I mean, if I didn't know and I didn't advocate with nobody else and I only went to that one doctor I went to and he's telling me, oh, I could give you this, but blah, blah, blah. And he just dismissed anything I told him. Well, you just be like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
What if you would have just listened to him and took it for granted and just suffered?
Yeah.
That sucks.
And I
they
feel
talk
like
about
that's
that in the podcast too, is like, I think that's one of the things she kind of said at the end was like, there's help and you don't have to suffer, because wasn't she saying something like when they were talking about HRT for women and the old study that scared everybody away from HRT has been debunked. and that you can take HRT even if you're past 60 years old. Used to it was like, well, if you hit menopause 10 years ago, then you're out of luck. Or if you're 60 years old or older, you're out of luck. That's not true, because those women didn't know they had options.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying, well, what happens, if I take the HRT? And she's like, you might feel better.
Yeah.
Let's just try it and see. You might feel better if you take it. You might not. It may take, some whatever. But anyway, we wanted to mention that for sure, that if you were in that generation that didn't have health care for women, and now you do have options available, it's never too late to start.
Yeah.
It's never too late to be curious and to ask questions and to search for different doctors and to have your blood work done now and help yourself now.
And the other thing that I would check into is, like she said, because I mentioned that before, of somebody saying something to me, the thing was, causing cancer, or if you've had cancer in your family. You need to check that, because she said only personally, unless you've had it, not that grandma had it, aunt had it. It would be certain ones that you've had. So there were certain people that
very nuanced, extremely nuanced to your individual health. Because there's a lot of women who say, oh, breast cancer runs in my family, so I can't take HRT, which is not true, because every cancer is different, and it would have to be an estrogen dominant type of cancer to even be affected by HRT. So that may or may not be true. So even if you had, like you said, cancer in your family, or you're older, or you think it's not possible, still have those conversations, still ask those questions. And when I was listening to that podcast, what I worried about is a lot of healthcare practitioners aren't educated enough in these things. They're not staying up with the new studies. There aren't enough studies. There isn't enough research, and it's just now coming out. So I can see where a doctor in everyday practice may or may not be hearing about these studies, or may not have time to keep themselves up with the specific nuanced new health care for women. So that's why I'm reading the book, that she put out, Generation M. That's why I'm listening to podcasts. That's why I'm learning for myself, because I don't want to just go off of somebody else's, what they may or may not know, because we've run into a lot of that where people just don't know. It doesn't mean they're bad doctors. It doesn't mean, that they have any ill will or ill intent. It's just, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why, we put out this podcast and we talk about these things, is because, number one, I like to know why things are the way they are. I like to know the root cause of issues. And when we're talking about hormones and, brain health and mental functioning, it helps me understand my body in a way that wasn't taught to me. And, it's really nobody else's job, I guess, to teach me. It really is my job to reach out and try to find the information and try to educate myself. I shouldn't, like I say, I wish it was taught to me in school. I wish it was taught to me at an earlier age. I wish it was taught to me by my gynecologist, and it wasn't. But at the end of the day, it's really my responsibility to learn. Information is so in your face these days. Like ChatGPT is my friend. I ask it things all day long, every day. It helps me learn things, and it helps me outline for this podcast. I mean, there's just so many things that it does. And Google, we hold many computers in our hands every day. So start asking the questions. It never hurts to ask, and it never hurts to research, and it never hurts to, look at the information available out there. And we kind of got off on another tangent. We're good at that.
Sorry.
So we got two more hormones to talk about. I know we're almost out of time. So the next one is cortisol dysregulation. As the body compensates for declining ovarian hormone production, the adrenal glands take on a bigger role. Chronic stress can overload the system. So cortisol may become elevated or dysregulated, and this causes heightened anxiety and mood swings. It disrupts sleep. It promotes abdominal, not, I was like the abominable snowman, abdominal fat storage around your tummy, and it weakens your stress resilience. And And this speaks to me because this is kind of where all my symptoms came from. But I mean, if you notice, as I'm reading off these symptoms, you've heard these before, heightens anxiety and mood swings. Well, so does decreased estrogen and progesterone, disrupts sleep. So does decreased progesterone, promotes abdominal fat storage. Well, so does estrogen dropping, weakens stress resilience. Well, if you're tired and you're moody and you're not sleeping and you're gaining weight and you're feeling funky about yourself, well, hell, yeah, it's going to weaken my stress resilience because I got a million things going on in my life already. And I just thought about this too, is like the middle age is kind of where your parents are aging and then you still could have children you're raising. I'm in that phase just now with my mother's had some health challenges this year and so has my father. My father has gotten to where he has rheumatoid arthritis in his wrist and he couldn't work for the past several years. Well, then that caused early onset Alzheimer's symptoms to kind of set in because he was inactive or whatever, and that runs in his family. And then my mom is battling uterine cancer and going through chemo and now radiation and things. And I still have a child at home, and they call that the sandwich generation. So you're dealing with not only aging parents, but you're dealing with children and then grandchildren, like you have grandchildren that you're also trying to, take care of and foster that relationship. And we're still working, we still have personal goals that we're trying to reach, and I feel like it's juggling, we're throwing all these and spinning plates. I always tell people, you see the people that spin plates on sticks, and they have like 10 plates going or whatever. Well, I feel like I get everything going for a little while and then one drops, and I get that one back up and then another one drops. And it's like, I can no longer spin all my plates. I can no longer juggle all my balls. And you know what I mean?
I'm sorry.
Dirty mind. I can't spin all my plates anymore. My plates
Let's stick with plates.
We'll stick with that analogy.
I don't want to hear about your ball juggling.
But don't you though? No.
Evidently my daughter don't.
Oh, girl. She's not even going to listen to this podcast anymore, so you ain't got to worry about her hearing this episode, right?
Oh, gosh.
That's funny. So the last one, let's go ahead and touch on the last one, and then we can, cover the little bit of things we got left. The last hormone is serotonin and dopamine imbalances. Due to the drop in estrogen and progesterone, levels of serotonin and dopamine, which are two critical neurotransmitters, can be affected. Low serotonin increases sadness, depression, irritability, and carb cravings. And low dopamine produces low motivation, low pleasure, and low energy. I have every one of these if I'm not really careful with my sleep, nutrition, exercise, things like that. Like we said, the bodybuilding lifestyle has really been a godsend to us, has really been a lifesaver because it promotes good physical habits. And when you have the very basics covered, enough water, enough sleep, enough exercise, sunshine, things like that, your body is naturally kind of getting more of the things that it needs to be able to produce things like serotonin and dopamine. But also, if you have any kind of mental challenges, like I have ADD and am on the autism spectrum, it's very low. And I'm very high functioning, partly because when I was a child, these were not really things that you were labeled with, and they weren't really understood, especially in women. And I've learned to cope and mask, and I have set my lifestyle habits in a way that nobody that knows me probably can tell any of these things, but that I have learned about myself. And along with that comes low serotonin and dopamine. So this is something I have struggled with my entire life, just being a female with these challenges. And it was really bad as a teenager. Because, as a teenager, these hormone levels are surging, not necessarily dropping. And with your cycle, they're going up and down all month long. You're riding this roller coaster, So when you have your moody hormonal teenagers, as they're going through these changes, these are things that you can kind of relate to if you think back, to your teenage years. You may have experienced these things before. You're just experiencing them in a different way now. And I know when I'm feeling some type of way, or when I'm feeling sad or depressed or bad or whatever, I want to eat. And if you have low serotonin and you're craving carbs, well, those are our comfort foods, and so that's where we're naturally going to reach towards something that makes us feel better, and not necessarily something that really makes us feel better. It'll, make us feel better in the moment mentally, but not physically. And that increases weight gain too, and you have also hormones like insulin, which is not on our list. And we've discussed it before, like insulin resistance. And we'll get into more of that next week's episode when we talk about muscle loss and weight gain through menopause, how, insulin resistance and all of these levels affect that. But that was all of the hormones that we had listed today. Estrogen decline, progesterone decline, testosterone decreases, cortisol is dysregulated, and we have serotonin and dopamine imbalances. And that causes all of these awful side effects that I'm sure all of us can relate to, no matter your age. Like I said, you could have gone through these changes as a teenager. You could be going through them now in midlife, before perimenopause, just with your cycle. If you're in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, I think all women have experienced some level of these changes and symptoms, and dysregulation and brain function is really what we're talking about today. We titled it mental health. And like we were talking about before we started recording, we think of mental health as like anxiety, depression, talk therapy, like how we feel. But that's all driven by cognitive brain function, neurotransmitters, synapses, chemicals, hormones, all these things are driven by biological, physiological functions. And that's not really discussed. But I think when we discuss it, it kind of takes away some of the stigmatism and some of the mystery and some of the fear of the unknown, when we can understand how our brain functions.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a good discussion.
And it was a very brief overview,
Yeah. But, I would just say the, takeaway, if you're going through these things, just know, that you're not alone. And understanding what's going on can be the first step in regaining control, and then finding the ways to support your mental well-being. So, be kind to yourself would be, the first thing. Give yourself grace that this is what's going on, and then, then you can take control. But we all got to give ourselves grace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, in AA, they were like, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. When you don't know what you don't know, and you're going through all of these things, and your life just feels like it's chaotic and turned upside down, and you don't know why, you can't really name the problem. So you can't really fix it, and I think that through this series, I know, we were worried about doing this episode today because we were like, can we really talk an hour about mental health? Are we being redundant? We feel like we're beating a dead horse talking about this week after week after week. But it's like, almost like, what am I trying to say? It's like, if you know what you're facing and you can name the problem and identify it, it almost like sheds a spotlight on it so that it doesn't look so scary. And so that at least you can name it. Because when I was going through my issues, I was never diagnosed with anything. And I kept searching for a diagnosis, and nobody could really pinpoint it or put a finger on it. And to me, that was very scary. And I feel like we we are not beating a dead horse, but we are being a little redundant. But it's in different aspects. It's in different perspectives. It's in different ways that this shows up for people, in hopes that some of this may resonate with somebody and help them through that dark time of their life. So I just wanted to take like a one second to really pinpoint like what you can do, and maybe tools and support that you can use to kind of help yourself. And that's lifestyle changes like exercise, sleep, hygiene, and nutrition, stress management like meditation, journaling, talk therapy, yoga, those kind of things really helped me. Support networks, like we said before, friends, support groups, communication with your partner. I know we've touched on these things in past episodes. So if you want to know more about it, you can go back and listen to the series if you haven't already. And then, of course, we're big advocates of hormone therapy and supplements, which we have a whole episode on HRT that you can go back. But there also are red flags like real clinical depression and anxiety. That's different than what you're just experiencing as far as, perimenopause and menopause. So just knowing those red flags and maybe seeking professional help, because there is a difference between you being clinically depressed or clinically anxious and just fighting, hormones and perimenopause. Yeah. So I encourage you to talk to your doctor, like we've said before. And if you're not getting the right answers, find another doctor.
Yes.
But that's all I have today. As always, we have our Girl Got Goals podcast at gmail.com that you guys can write into and let us know any feedback you have. If you think we're talking too much, if you think we're beating a dead horse, let us know. If you have any topics that you would like to suggest, if you have any questions about any of the episodes that you've heard so far. Also, Girl Got Goals podcast on YouTube. Go like and subscribe. Watch our videos as we put those up. You can also leave comments there on the videos. And next, what we're doing bi-weekly. So in the next 2 weeks, our next episode will come out, and it is going to be the topic that everybody loves, and that is fat loss. We're going to talk about why you are doing the same things you've always been doing and gaining weight. We're going to talk about how hormone changes and fluctuations in menopause is impacting that, and what you can do to try to help stop it and maybe help reverse some of the side effects that you're feeling. It's never too late. You're not alone. And as always, remember, progress isn't perfect. Bye, guys.